You know, we joke, it's actually not a joking situation, but we joke about, people jumping to get back on cruises, and of course, there's a COVID case. Is this speak to the trouble that the industry has, or does this just tell you that this industry is going to be fine, that people, even in this environment, want to get on a cruise, that once COVID is finally over, that there will be tremendous demand for these businesses long term?
Sure. So a couple of things. I think, the bigger issue for Carnival and Royal and Norwegian is that they're, not allowed to operate right now by the CDC. So I know there was another cruise line that had that case, and that those aren't necessarily the protocols that the major cruise lines will be following when they're allowed to start sailing again from the U.S. But I think the key thing here, too, is there was reportedly a case, right? I don't know how much information has actually been confirmed, but the idea is not that there won't be this virus on ships. It's everywhere in society, right? It's in every state, and there will be some cases. The question is, can you keep it from spreading? And if somebody has it, can you get them the care that they need? The same concerns that you would have on land, right? So I don't think there's an expectation that there's a world in which that doesn't exist at the moment, anywhere. But there is demand, right, for cruises. I do think that's clear.
Extraordinary, though, that you get on a cruise and you immediately, all guests and non-essential crew are quarantining. I guess you have to brace yourself for that, but it's a very sad state.
I don't think that those are the protocols that the major cruise lines, Carnival, Royal, Norwegian, and their brands will be following. We can see in Europe some examples where cruising was allowed to restart in Italy and Germany, including some brands owned by Carnival and Royal. And when a case would occur or be found, that person would be isolated, and it did not affect, in most cases, others on the ship. So it doesn't. I don't think that the goal is not to have everybody on the ship quarantine if there's a case, right? It's just, again, the same thing that we do in society now. If someone has it, they quarantine. Work goes on, school goes on, all of those other activities go on, and that'll be the same with vacationing.
Yeah, so, with regards to cruise, this is, there's obviously a risk proposition with getting on a cruise and being stuck out at sea for however many days. There are other elements, though, of the, the travel and leisure space, whether you're talking about theme parks, casinos, other places where maybe I would think people would feel more comfortable going, knowing that they're only going to be there for a couple hours and can kind of go and come freely. Do you think that part of the travel and leisure segment could rebound faster than, say, something like cruise lines?
Well, we are seeing things like regional gaming where revenues have come back. But I think if you're talking about a cruise line, a comparable thing would be kind of a hotel stay somewhere, right, for multiple days, right? Because some of those other things aren't really substitutes for going on vacation. And the cruise lines, the protocol is going to be testing everybody at boarding. And I don't know of another business that does that tests everyone before they go into a restaurant or tests everybody before they go into a hotel. So when the cruise lines that are under jurisdiction of the CDC here sailing out of the U.S., which is not the case that was being talked about earlier, that will be testing everybody before they enter, which in some ways may make some people feel that that's a safer, that is an environment where everyone's been tested, which again, I don't think there's any place, school or work where that's happening elsewhere.
Right.
So now there's a difference between the hotels where there's actually a lot of business travel and even that's a function of probably other things going on in the economy before business travel comes back. But we saw leisure demand through the summer, and that's actually what helped the hotels through the summer was leisure demand coming back. The cruise lines, of course, are pure leisure travel, so when they are allowed to restart, the only thing they need is for that leisure demand to come back. And with business travel, at this point at least, vacations are not going to be replaced by a Zoom call, right? People are going to take vacations. Business travel, it will take a bit longer to come back, as we're seeing, compared to leisure travel in the summer at hotels.
So at some point, presumably, there's going to be a vaccine. It'll be widely distributed, and one day, COVID, we don't know when, will be a thing of the past. Are there any areas of the companies that you cover for whom, in the meantime, there's credit concern about whether they have the balance sheet buffer to get to that endpoint?
Sure. So I would say that for the major hotel companies and for the cruise lines, they've all raised a lot of liquidity. So the cruise lines can generally get to early 2022 in a scenario with zero revenues, which that's not our expectation that that's what it's going to be. But they do have the liquidity, despite burning a couple $100 million a month in most cases for the cruise lines. They do have that liquidity. Now that's going to make it tougher. The equity value, if we say that that demand would go back to where it was tomorrow and profitability would go back to where it was tomorrow, they're going to have to live with the debt they've borrowed and the share dilution from having raised that, right? So there's still that doesn't mean there's not upside in the stocks from these levels, but if demand went back to January magically, the stock values certainly won't, and that's definitely an issue for the cruise lines because they've had to do a lot of that capital raising. For hotel companies like Hilton and Marriott, they have liquidity. I think Marriott has something like 4 years of liquidity. Hilton has over 2 years of liquidity, so they'll be here, and those are capital light businesses, right? Hilton and Marriott kind of rent their brands out to hotel owners, so they'll collect their revenue, and they don't have the asset intensive nature that the cruise lines do. So that asset light model in a downturn like this is certainly a healthier model.
Just to be clear to our viewers, and you have been right in pointing out, this is a Sea Dream 1 voyage that we've been discussing that had been sent back to Barbados, a Caribbean voyage, and actually only about 50 or so passengers on board. The crew was actually larger. Robin, is there anyone that's managed to pivot really rather well in this? Because we started this whole conversation off by talking about Disney, which has managed to really double down on streaming and perhaps shy away, be able to perform and focus on that as perhaps other parts of the business doesn't do so well. I think of Marriott, which has done, sort of taken on Airbnb. We've looked at Accor hotels before that had bought One Fine Stay. Some of these companies were set for a new dawn, a new era. How have companies pivoted and perhaps looked for opportunities in amid what is a dark, dark cloud of COVID?
Sure. So for Marriott and Hilton, they're fantastic companies. They have fantastic brands, but 70% of their room nights are from business travel. And so that's just going to take time to come back, and that's not something they can do. A smaller company, Choice Hotels, actually, that we have a buy on, is 2/3 leisure travel, and they have brands like Econo Lodge and Roadway and Comfort Inn. And that's what, people are getting on the road and doing domestic leisure travel. And so they're actually poised to benefit from that. Choice Hotels, and they're a franchisor. But I do think looking ahead, and I think that's really your question is about where does this go over the long term. I think companies like Hilton and Marriott, we are going to see them making some changes so that even when business travel does return, that maybe the check-in experience is going to be done at a kiosk, and then you have keyless entry to your room, and it's going to reduce the interaction, and that's also, of course, going to save some money too. Same thing with during your stay, they'll change over a room, but you might not get daily housekeeping during your stay, and again, it's going to be presented as that's to keep others out of your room, but also there's a cost saving element to that as well. So I think we will see some changes with that to keep expenses down and to minimize some interactions. And I think some of those things will stay with us even after the pandemic has passed.